Thought Leadership. My name is Bobby Umar. I'm a professional speaker by trade, and I'm with a couple other awesome speakers. And I often say, hey, I'm a 5-time TEDx speaker, and I do this and that. And now I have some, super uber TEDx speakers with me. And Drew and Blake I've known for many, many years. And we're going to talk about TEDx, authority building, storytelling, speaking. And and if you don't mind, we're gonna catch up because we haven't talked to each other for a long time. So this is actually a bitter reunion. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
This is the part where one of us talks first. Yeah. we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to that pandemic moment where nobody knows who to talk first, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's a conference call or a Zoom. Or luckily, you guys, your videos are on. So those who are listening to this live stream, we're streaming pretty much everywhere. Like it's on LinkedIn for the most part, but it's going to Twitter, it's going to Facebook. And then it's also going to some of their Facebook and LinkedIn posts as well. So you guys can ask us questions. You can, the first thing is let us know where you're from. Are you if you are if you're listening in, let us know where you're from. But you have questions for us. Right now we have among us 22 TEDx talks. So that's right, Angie. Is Drew the lollipop guy? He's the lollipop guy. I know. So there you go. See, people are knowing who you guys are. So tell us where you're from. Where you're calling in from? Is it North America, South America, Latin America, Africa, Europe, Australia? Any one of those places could be part of this conversation, and you can ask us questions. What I'm going to start off with is I'm going to talk about. I just want to get into actually where we met, which is an Angie's from Calgary, Alberta. We met at TEDx. So my first ever TEDx event was called TEDx UWO. And what I recall at that time was I was nervous about TEDx because I didn't know what it was. And when someone invited me to speak, I was like, oh, what is TEDx? And I looked it up. It's like, wow, look at all these famous politicians and leaders speaking this thing. I guess it's kind of a big deal. I better do a good job. And they said I had to come up with an original talk. And I was like, what? And with minimal slides. Oh, I love slides. What do I do? And 18 minutes, like, what? Show is so short? And I was really nervous. And that day I practiced my talk 30 times, which for me is pretty uncanny because I don't typically rehearse my talks that much. Once I have the structure of my PowerPoint, I'm good. And I rehearsed 30 times. Every single time it went terrible or I screwed something up. And then I saw it opened up with Blake, and Blake started. And I'm not sure, Blake, was that your first one or was that like a couple in?
First one, yeah.
First one. Oh, so it was your first one. And Drew, I'm not sure when it was yours because I know you'd already done all Lollipop at that point. Is that right?
Yeah,
I think it was his second one, wasn't it?
I think it was the second.
It was my third, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a TEDx Toronto for the first one, and then I did a follow-up to that. And then I remember because UWO was my first university one.
Okay, yeah. So then Blake comes out and he tells this whole story with the guitar, and we're making a band, and he started drumming, and I was like, and then he's like, boom, welcome to TEDx. And I was like, damn, this guy is good. It was like, oh, and I was like, wow, how am I going to compete with this guy? And then I'm not sure when Drew went, but then Drew went before me, and I think he went maybe somewhere in the middle. And then Drew goes, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is amazing. Holy cow. I was so nervous. And after that, I was super nervous. And never again, when I did TEDx after that, did I go near the end. Because I was like, because I went on like 5:30 p.m. I was like, I never want to go at the end because I was so nervous. And so I kind of wanted you to share, your experience of that first time we all met.
Like, you fire away. You were the host, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. You're the host. So you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, what I do remember is that I stayed at a buddy's place in London, Ontario the night before, and I bought my shirt for $3 at Walmart. So that was, I was excited about that. It's like, okay, $3 shirt. Let's go rock this thing. And I also was very new to this TEDx thing. I'm like, I don't know. Apparently there's a lot of cachet to this. And I was super nervous about that, but also really pumped to be the host and the first speaker of the day. And some specific moments that I recall are, I have never seen someone create such a sweet, welcoming, bonfire-esque networking circle in my life as I had seen Bobby Umar do on the first break at that event. So my very first memory of you, Bobby, in my life was I literally saw just like a circle of smiling people in the lobby on the break, and you were just there like brightening their existence. That was literally my first memory of you. And then what was super cool is that I was so pumped to see Drew speak, because at that stage in our careers, Drew and I were like sort of budding friendship mode. We had like emailed a couple times. We met in person sort of once. We were always kind of following or going before the other guy at some like university circuit keynote things. So I was so excited because to me, Drew was a familiar face at that point, but still an early days friendship. So to get to welcome him side stage and like introduce him on stage and watch him rock it on stage and then like sort of high five as he was walking off, it was a chance to deepen the rapport and develop that friendship with Drew even more. So it's awesome because then each of us did some things collaboratively and individually in a huge way since then. But those are some specific memories and moments from that day for me with you guys.
I have no memories of that day. No, and it's not because it wasn't memorable. Let me be very clear. What I mean by that is that as a general rule, I remember nothing from any of my TED days. Like I was thinking about it, Bobby, when you said, let's talk a little bit about some of those experiences. And all I remember is terror. And it doesn't matter how many. I really have no real memories of TED events, except I think maybe when I was hosting one of them one year. But Blake, it's funny when you say budding friendship, because what I do sort of remember is I think we may have crossed paths very briefly at the TEDx Toronto event where I did the lollipop talk. But then I think like 3 days later, I got an email from Blake that just said, in a year's time, we are going to be best friends. And I remember thinking that is one of the best ways of opening an email that I could ever imagine. And that's actually what started it, man, is that you just emailed me out of the blue, said, I met you very briefly at TEDx Toronto. In a year from now, we're going to be best friends. And you know what? The thing about Blake is that, and I've said this a bunch of times, is that Blake, more than almost any speaker I know, actually lives the stuff that he talks about on stage. And so that to me is the big memory that I have, is that was the first time I got to meet you. And Bobby, I heard about you before I went there, and we hadn't met yet, but it was you were connected with Shad. And one of my students had gone to Shad and knew you really well and told me that I had to make sure that I saw you. So my only real memory of that time, because I was so scared, I'm always so scared, was Bobby had a teddy bear. And I remember thinking, like, if that guy's going on stage with a teddy bear, I really shouldn't be so freaked out, because clearly this is like a warm place. So yeah, man, like, yeah, is it that one? It was that he actually came on it. Yeah, he came on and hugged it. I didn't know it was Blake's. Blake, was that your teddy bear? I didn't know that was your teddy bear.
I tell the story about what happened. My first TED Talk, I was super nervous. I'd already seen you. I'd seen Drew and Blake do masterful TED Talks. I had to do a good job. I knew the branding required of this. And so I was pacing back and forth. I saw this teddy bear and I asked if I could grab it. And I'm not sure I asked you, Blake, or maybe someone backstage, but I said, can I borrow the teddy bear? And someone said, sure. And I took the teddy bear and I was hugging it and pacing back and forth because I was so nervous. And then I walked down on stage and then I basically, before I started my talk, I hugged it. I put the teddy bear on the table that was there and I started talking. And people think that I planned that, like the teddy bear and the hug and whatever. But no, I found it backstage and I was super nervous. But I knew it was Blake's. I just didn't realize you still had it. That was just epic right now. That was amazing.
Also, wow. That it's within like sort of arm reach type of thing.
Yeah, it never is. I just brought it back from a speech, so it's like funny. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and you know what happens if you're listening, guys. You know, we're talking about TEDx and storytelling and how you become an authority expert, a speaker in your space. And so if you have questions, put them in the chat so we can answer those questions because these guys have a ton of knowledge. And I guess I'll go into starting with a question, which is, you know, how does one become an 8-time or 9-time TEDx speaker? And I'll start with you, Blake, and then we'll go to Drew. Like why 9 times? Like tell me that. Like tell me how it evolved and then why go that many?
Well, I find that as a professional speaker, sometimes this thing happens where people sort of feel like they can't participate in certain experiences because now they're like a paid speaker. So things like speaking competitions or volunteer events, like, well, I'm a paid speaker now, so I'm not doing that stuff. Me, I love an excuse to freak myself out and create new content on stage. So I love things like speaking competitions or like contests, TEDx, because it freaks me out far more than a keynote ever will. I don't know why, it just does. And why 9-time TEDx speaker? I just like you guys. I mean, I keep getting invited. Like I've never applied for any. I don't think you guys have applied for any or many either. And I think for me, it comes down to this distinction between applications versus declarations. So a lot of people are like, apply, 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 apply. And it's like the job market. They're just barfing applications at TEDx events all around the world. And they just go into this pile of other applicants. So applications, whatever, get in line. Good luck. Declarations, that's always been my kind of thing. I love just saying, hey, I think it'd be cool to do a TEDx talk. And I'll just tell a lot of people. And I won't be desperate about it, but I'll just declare, like, I'd love to do that. It looks fun. I think it'd be a fun thing to say. Yeah, I worked on it. I built it. It was done. So I'm always very open and transparent with what I'm building and how I'm building it and whether it's failing or working, or I'm just kind of a crash test dummy that way. And I enjoy that process. So I guess my fortune cookie response is declaring that getting on stages like these, for me, works way better than applying and asking if I can come.
Yeah, you know what? The big thing for me and the story I like to tell is that I only got to do my first TED Talk, and that's the one that really launched me because my students made me do it. I used to run the leadership program at U of T, and I was told by one of my students, the first guy to ever introduce me to a TED Talk, the great Sir Ken Robinson and Do Schools Kill Creativity. And he came in, the same student who got me on that first TED Talk, and he said, there are open applications, 3 open spots for TEDx Toronto. I had no idea what a TEDx was because I think there was like 7 of them in the world at that time. And they said, well, you should apply. And I said, I'm just a part-time speaker. And I always told my students, you're not allowed to say you're just anything because it gives people permission to expect less from you.
Right.
So the problem is when you try to pull that crap on them, they were having none of it. And I was so scared at the idea of giving a presentation in that forum, seeing who had done it before, that I begged off. And what they did is they got on this new contraption called Facebook, which at the time was just sort of becoming a thing among students, and started a group called Get Drew Dudley to Speak at TEDx Toronto. And I guess what happened is they all nominated me. And I got a call from the TEDx folks, and I was sitting in my basement. I had packed everything up. I had just quit my job. I was waiting for 1-800-GOT-JUNK when I got a call from the TEDx folks saying, look, we don't know who you are really, but the most nominations we got for anyone was 2, and you got 41. So it wasn't me, guys. It was not me. It was that group of people. And so the way I always talk about it is that if you have people in your life who are trying to hide whatever it is they put out in the world, their music, their poetry, their work, their speaking, like it's such a good friendship move to push. And the only reason I got to do that first one was because of my students. I did a couple more because people saw me at that one. And then what happened was the TEDx talk went on the main TED site in 2012. So 2 years after the original talk, it went on the TED site. And after that, it was more like, I think other TEDx's wanted to get like people they thought were TED speakers or saw as TED speakers on there. And I think that's why I started getting invited to the other ones. Now, the problem was then they'd stick you on at the end, which you nailed it, man. Like I would much rather tee things off and get it done and then get to spend the rest of the day enjoying yourself. Because if you're watching this, I don't think there's anybody who does this job seriously who isn't scared to some degree before they do it. And I think you're getting that for most, except maybe Blake, because he brings such magnificent love to everything he does and he likes being scared. But you'll find, I think, most professional speakers.
I know.
Blake, man, I can't believe you do that. Like to just come up with new stuff constantly just blows my mind. I think it's amazing, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I get scared too. Like every single talk that I do, like having nerves means that I care, and for TED Talks for sure, I get scared quite a bit. And I think that for me, I got the first TEDx talk, and then what happened was people kept asking me for doing more, and so I did 4 TEDx talks in about a period of 2 years. And part of it is because I always say I built a strong brand. The reason I got the first one is because people knew who I was. They knew I spoke. They knew about me on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those other platforms. I said, "Why don't you come out and do this?" And then when I became a big, Twitter guy and got that big digital reach, people wanted me to come to their talks and do it. I didn't do and I was a quote unquote 4-time TEDx speaker for a long time. I never pursued other ones because I was like, oh man, it's so much work to do an original talk from scratch without my slides. Like, man, I don't need that pressure. But then one day, I think about 7 years later, there was a TED Talk application for the power of connection theme, which is like, that's my hashtag I use on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, okay, well, I have this TED Talk in my back pocket I want to talk about hugs. So let me apply. And all I did was I sent a video. Hey, listen, I would love to do this. I made my declaration, Blake. And then they called me the next day and said, hey, can you come and do this? And so, and of course, preparing that speech was, again, just oh my God, what a monster that was to prepare that speech. But it went well. So, part of the reason why we're doing this conversation is to talk about, how TED can also propel our authority and help us become experts. I mean, can you guys maybe start with you, Drake? Can you comment on how it actually helped your brand and how it helped you become known as an authority expert to, from what I saw, your speaking career really took off with the help of with a bit of TEDx.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think what really happened was it was just a testament to the power of a story is what really popped up with me, because I'll be straight with you. I've watched that TED Talk that I did, the first one, I think 8 times in total in 13 years now, because I hate it. I hate the story because I still tell that story, but I, in my mind, think it's delivered so poorly from a speaking perspective, because I talk really fast and I don't actually pause for 1 second. I don't even take a deep breath. I've actually had people tell me that they use it for their ESL classes, because if an ESL student can follow that talk, it means they can follow English because I'm speaking so quickly. And so what happened was, in some ways, my friend, it actually sort of pigeonholed me in some ways to do this talk about the lollipop moment, which, I'm not going to rehash here, but ultimately it gave this impression that I was a motivational speaker who told, cute little stories. And in reality, what I was trying to do, or what I wanted to do, is position myself as an authority on practical leadership, value-based leadership. But it was this one story that I told at the end of my full keynotes that became the TED Talk. And what happened was I've been the lollipop guy ever since. And I'll be honest with you, for a few years, I fought back against that. And then I started to realize this, for what it's worth to anyone listening out there. If people tell you that some part of you inspires them, if people tell you that some part of you has an impact on them, who are we to decide that that's not okay with us? And so I always like, I don't want to be the lollipop guy. I don't want to be the lollipop guy because it doesn't have enough gravitas. And then what I'm finding is that the type of people who I worried would be turned off because of a lack of gravitas actually responded to a positive story. And so for me, the big push that came back, honestly, off the top, was that it kind of made me feel like I had to be this guy, and people expected real positivity from me every single time. And so you feel like they know you before you meet them. And so it actually created a lot of pressure. It's only been in the last 5 or 6 years that I finally decided I'm going to embrace it. And I really am happy with the fact that I'm known for something. Like, how lucky are any of us to have something with which we're associated, right? Like, you are the power of connection, Bobby. Like, when people talk to me, Bobby Umar, I'm like networked, connected, right? When Blake, it's all about gratitude. And to me, that I think is something worth admiring. And even if you were like, oh, I don't feel like I'm the connection guy, or I don't feel like I'm the gratitude guy, but when I think of those things, I think of you guys. And I hope that that's a compliment.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Blake. Blake, what do you think?
Well, something that's really present for me right now is, as Drew said earlier, I went to TEDx Toronto because, again, at that time, what year was that, Drew, when you spoke? 2011 or 10 or something?
2010.
At that time, I don't know, I'd given maybe like 10 speeches where I got paid. Like, I really want to do this. Like, this is what I would like to be doing for this
A case
next
a
phase
case of
my
beer
life.
is still paid, man. A case of beer is still paid.
Right. Okay, so I did 10 and a half at that point, 10 and a half. But yes, I went to TEDx Toronto. I had no ticket to it. I sat in the lobby because there's a TV where you can watch the event on stage from the lobby. So I went to the event, sat in the lobby, watched it on TV, and then on a break, one of the ushers was like, "Hey, everyone, come on in, come on in, come on in." And I was just sitting on the bench because, I don't have a ticket. And he was like frustrated with me. He's like, "Come on in." I'm like, "Okay." So I go in. I'm like, "Yeah, all right, I'm in." But I only caught maybe 2 or 3 of the talks at the end of the day. So I saw Drew's on the TV before I got to like go in. And the moral of this story is I walked up to Drew after, like he mentioned, and I just said, "Hey, like we've messaged once or twice and we're kind of in the same circle, it seems. Nice to meet you. We're going to be friends someday." And I literally met Drew like minutes after his speaking career was like born. Like I literally met him as he was just on the come down, the adrenaline come down of his completed first TEDx talk, which was like such a beautiful, well-deserved springboard into so much. And to know that Drew, that I met you like an hour after all that is pretty special. And so I say all that because I feel like with TEDx, everyone's got a different experience of it. I mean, some people, they do a TEDx talk and they are literally Oprah the next year. Other people, they give a TEDx talk and then the producers of the event lost the footage, and so they never even like it. And then
It happened twice.
there's like everything in between. So my experience, I relate it to like people with a PhD. For those folks tuned in who've got a PhD, respect to you. I'm never getting one. I just like undergrad broke me. But how many people who wrote their thesis have had someone read it? Like, how many theses get read? Barely any. Whereas a book, if you self-publish a thing that's 14 pages, it also might not get read, but you get a lot of clout when you become an author.
Yeah.
So with TEDx, I've given 9 of them. No one's ever asked me what they're about and how many views I've gotten, which is so interesting to me. Never. What's it about? How many views? Never been asked. And so my TEDx talks don't have like tons of views, and they're all about like similar things, but they're different. So 9-time TEDx speaker has gotten me into a lot of parties, metaphorically, as a speaker. It's like, oh, 9-time TEDx speaker. But people aren't like asking me about views or topics. They're just like, oh, this guy's got the 9-time TEDx feather in his baseball cap. Let's talk to him. So I'm not saying just get this like weird credibility thing for your LinkedIn profile, but I get a lot of joy figuring out how can everyone position themselves in a cool, intriguing way. Like whether it's 9-time TEDx speaker, or whether it's the lollipop guy, or whether it's like the LinkedIn guru, power of connection, like empire builder Bobby, or even if people just only wear baseball hats all the time while they're like on Zoom. It's like the baseball hat person. I don't know, I'm making it up, but authority building doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to everyone. Authority building is just like choose the authority you want built and like be bold about it and have fun in the process.
Yeah, and I think that. Oh, go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say we've seen it like in today's world that you don't really have to have anything behind it. And so what I think is so important is that make sure you're more than the title. Like you were saying, my friend, you're 9-time TED speaker, but you're a lot more than that. And, I think that we're seeing in the world, you've got is it George Santos or whatever his name is? Like you just cloak yourself in credibility that isn't necessarily actually there. So I think a real big part of authority is making sure that there's more than the cover sheet. And because we're seeing a lot in this world where people are coming out and they just make up their cover sheets. And when it gets blown up, it doesn't look good on them or anyone else. So make sure there's some depth underneath whatever wrapping paper you get put around you, I think is what's really important.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some credibility to having the TEDx brand, right? But I think if it's multiple, then it's kind of like being nominated 5 times by, let's say for acting. Well, then I think even if you never win, you still are known by your peers as a pretty formidable actor. And so having the 5 or the 8 or the 9, I mean, then it's still helpful to say, well, this person clearly is a pretty good speaker, a good storyteller. They know what they're talking about, even if you don't know what they're nominated for or what their TEDx talks are about. I think that's certainly, and to me, I see it as it's an asset. It's an asset that I have as a speaker that gets to open doors. It's the same impact as having a book. It's the same impact to me as having a program. I usually say getting a TEDx talk is something that I believe anyone can do, and with the right kind of strategy. And that's kind of what and I know Blake does that. He helps people get TED Talks, and I also help people do that now as something as part of my coaching that I do. But I think the credibility and the brand building is it's a great asset to have. So that's, for me, I'm very grateful for what it's done for me. For me, the 2 things that has helped my life as a speaker become more fulfilling has been TED Talks, the multiple TED Talks, and my digital presence, because both of those things have got, when people find out I've happened to follow on Twitter, although they're slowly going away because of Elon Musk. Ever since Elon Musk took over, I had 518,000. I've now lost 20,000 followers, like 200 every week for like a year. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, but still, having all those followers got me a lot of speaking gigs. And having the TEDx talks got me speaking gigs. Now, if I had a series of books, which I don't have, I did the minimum 25-page book on Amazon and I published it. But if I had more books, then that could also help me too. So I think that's why TEDx is really, really great for your brand or building expertise around who you are. And I want to comment to people, guys, if you are listening to this and you have questions. Right now, the feed, I can't seem to look at the feed, but there were questions. I see feeds on LinkedIn where people are asking questions, but I don't see them in the Restream feed. But if you have questions or you want to share something, by all means, put your comments in the chat box so we can take a look at it. We'd love to actually see it. Blake, what is that? What are you holding up there?
Someone who went all in on the author journey. My good friend Drew Dudley. And one of the coolest book writing experiences ever was the way he did it, which is he literally gathered a team of people he trusted at the rough copy stage of development to say, I'm going to write this book. It is daunting and it is my own Everest. So I'm going to get a few people in my corner to kick this journey off. And I got to be there, and it was amazing to see it go from like concept to this glorious piece of literary awesomeness. So I basically just a show and tell guy. I got stuff, guys. I can show you.
Hey, I got to tell you, if anyone's watching here, once in your life, you've got to do an intellectual wedding. That's what we called that, because I'm not married, right? So what I did is I got 12 of my best friends together to do a weekend of exercises to work out, to pull some stuff for the book. But mostly we commented, it's my intellectual wedding, because how often in your life do you get to bring all the most important people, your favorite people together? And you usually do it just at your wedding. But because I didn't get married, or I haven't gotten married yet, I just invited 12 of the best minds that I knew up to a retreat. And every one of you out there, come up with a reason to ask your intellectual wedding guests to come away for a weekend. Just pick something that you're struggling with and just tell people, come, let's do a weekend. We're going to hack through this together. Man, one of the best experiences of my life. And Bobby, I'll mention this too. When you talk about authority for any speaker out there, whether it's TEDx or something else, it doesn't matter how much they're paying you. If they have a multi-camera setup with good audio and an audience, do it. Like the number one thing is that
completely agree.
Multi-camera shoot, good audio, audience. That is a speaker's goal. Like, it's not just that you do a TEDx talk. It's that most TEDx talks, some TEDx events have really great production values. And if you're looking at becoming a speaker, being a professional storyteller, as Blake once, I heard him say, a professional sentimentalist is what I heard him call himself once, which I loved. Make sure that you find that opportunity to get a really good video with multi-camera and an audience in it. It's absolutely gold. It's really expensive, and that's one of the best things about, if you're like, oh, is a TEDx talk really worth it? Forget the clout, forget the 3 red letters. Focus on the fact that if you can get that, and if you can do it at other events, do that too.
Completely agree. I tell people that the branding is one thing, but getting the video is fantastic. When I had my video, it was the best marketing tool I had to put myself out there. So yes, and that actually reminds me of how to identify when TEDx talks that you get accepted into are maybe not that good. So for example, of the 5, 2 of them, there is no videos of those things ever. And because it was not really the best organized TED Talk. In retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't know. But, maybe I would ask you guys, how do you know if you get a TED? And also, I say I'm a 5-time TEDx speaker, but I'm also a 3-time TEDx rejecter. Been asked to do 3 other TED Talks. And I said no, I turned them down. So I want to ask you about that. Like, how do you identify it? Maybe you should steer clear from this TED Talk invitation.
Blake, my man.
Let's go, Blake. Sorry, I should ask for one person.
I'm a little bit of a hybrid on this one because, as I said earlier, I really get excited to create a thing. And so, like, I have some friends where it's like, oh, if I'm seen at that event, like, it'll just like blow my brand, like in a bad way. Just like, oh, I can't be seen there. Like, oh. So I'm not saying I would do everything, but if I actually feel pulled to create something and like use it to build new content or stories or thought leadership, I'd probably just story tell the whole journey. Meaning like, hey, I just said yes to this event that's happening in a cow field. There's actually not even any internet. And I don't know if anyone's going to be there, but I'm working really diligently to build my talk. Like I'd story tell the whole journey and then the delivery of it. Cool. Yeah, that's a piece of the puzzle. But I think an easy assessment is just like asking a couple basic questions of how many cameras will be there and like, is the audio feed direct to camera or not? Like those kinds of questions, not to be a jerk, but that kind of question, if they're like able to answer it easy, okay, you're dealing with some pros. Whereas if they're like, well, my mom's driving me and she's going to bring her iPhone 4 but she doesn't use it anymore, then that's also a hint of like what we're kind of working with in the wings of the stage. Drew, what do you think?
About 3 things. How many times have they done it? Is one. Try to avoid first times if possible, just because that's where a lot of the kinks work out. Plus, they're usually a smaller group to begin with. So, how many times have they done it? Can I see the videos from last year? I think honestly, just looking at previous videos tell you all you need to know. I did 2 events, neither one of which probably might surprise some people that I said yes, but I looked at their videos from previous years and they were dynamite. And so for me, like Blake, people saying I don't want to go to that because it might hurt my brand. I'm kind of with you on this, which is I once heard Chris Rock say, if you have to drive 4 hours to do 5 minutes and get paid $50, you do it because that's what you have to do to make your craft, like to become someone who has mastered their craft. But what happens is if you're going to put in the time and the effort to do a talk that you really do want a video from, how many times have you done it? And can I see last year's videos? And where is it? And those 3 things will probably tell you all you need to know. If it's in a gym, God help us all. But basically, is it in a multi-purpose room? Is it in a theater? If they're doing it in an auditorium or a theater, that's better. If they've had videos before, check that out. If they've had a few years under their belt, check those out. So those are the key pieces that I think are whether it's going to be worth a good investment of your time. Acknowledging that any time that you can get somebody's attention and they will give it to you is a gift. And so if there's 5 people there, I've spoken to 6 people at an event for which I was paid 5 figures. And there were 6 people there, which makes everybody uncomfortable, right? Because you're taking people's money. There's only 6. But how many people get 6 people to listen to them for an extended period of time in any given day? It's really a gift. And for anybody listening out there who's worried about whether or not you're going to get the big gigs, every gig is a big gig if you bring it. So I know that sounds cheesy, but the attention of 6 people is pretty amazing. Most people in the world don't get that.
No, I agree with that. And I think the video question, I think, is a really good one. The other 2 things I would look at is distance before the event. So when I got into a TEDx event that was 9 months away. That was actually, that was one of the best, most organized ones I ever saw. The one that I accepted 2 months before, that also was not as good. And so the timing piece was, and the other part was, their social presence. So I said, do you have a website? They had no website. They had a Facebook page that wasn't working. I was like, okay, this is a little bit scary. So those are two things that, and then I want to comment on your point about, the show must go on. I'll tell a little story, which is, and I'm going to segue into storytelling in a moment. The show must go on. I once directed and produced a show of Pirates of the Penzance. Okay, and I actually was playing the Pirate King in this thing, and I was the director too. And we had this great production, and we decided to do a Friday matinee, hoping that maybe we can encourage seniors in schools to show up. But through our own disorganization, that didn't happen. There was 14 people in the audience in a theater of 450 people. And we had a cast of 35. And so there's more of us on stage than there were and we're like, okay, listen, guys, it doesn't matter. These people have paid for a top-notch performance. Let us go and give it our all, because the show must go on. So I just wanted to just share that quick story. And there are a couple of questions that are coming up here now. We have Joey Himmelfarb. Who are your speaking heroes? And I'll let you guys think about it. And I'll actually go first because I saw the question for a while, so I had time to think about it. Two of my speaking heroes, number one is Gary Vaynerchuk. I just love his energy and the way he talks on stage and keeps it real. I also love his passion for kindness and compassion, empathy. I think those are two things that I strive to be as a speaker. That's one that really gets me. Another one that I love is actually my mentor and a fellow speaker, Ron Tite. I'm gonna shout out Ron Tite, man. I just think that I've always wanted to be funny on stage. And when I see him on stage, he's really funny. And then the first time I saw him, he was hilarious. I wanted to be like that too. I was like, listen, I want to be like you. That's who I want to mentor me. Someone who I want to be like. That's what it is. And then the third one I'll say is Malala Yousafzai, because there's such great power and vulnerability. And the way she talks, even though she talks, very calm and steady, but gets very vulnerable and very heartfelt, I find that to be just incredibly inspiring. And that's kind of how I like to be on stage when I do vulnerable storytelling. So that's my thoughts. Blake, how about you?
One is really coming to mind. Maybe I'll get a second shortly, but the one that really stands out to me is a speaker who he spoke at my first day of training as a residence advisor when I was a third-year university student. It was like night one, moment one training. I'm like, okay, this is my new job. I'm excited about it. Let's go. And some of you guys might know him a little bit or a lot, but this guy's name is Tony Conte. And speaking is not his full-time profession, but he speaks a lot in the circuit in the university college space. At least he used to. And he just had this thing about him where he opened up the speech by just pulling a chair up. He sat in the chair and just kind of looked at all of us. There was about 100 of us in the room, and it was like 9 p.m. So it was kind of twilighty. It was just a good vibe. He just pulled up the chair and he just sort of shared his intention. He kind of just looked at us and he's like, here's my intention for tonight. And it was just thoughtful and cool. And we all kind of leaned into it. And then he put the chair off to the side and he just brought this phenomenal hour of hilarity and comedy and sincerity and wisdom, and 19-year-old me was just gripped by the whole thing. And then he kept showing up at conferences that I was going to as a student leader. He was sort of on that circuit at that time, which each of us have now been on. And so he kept showing up. I'm like, man, this guy, he kind of just felt like a bit of a lighthouse to me, where every time he showed up, I felt like my world was just better having heard him speak. And the way he spoke, I really resonated with, because he was just really down to earth, casual, similar on stage, off stage. It wasn't a thing he put on. He just sort of walked up and was himself. And then when he walked off, he was still himself. So that's my one instead of two.
That's fine. How about you, Drew?
I'm going to admit something here that I hope doesn't come off wrong, but I don't have any. I don't listen to a lot of speakers because I find that, and I think this is the nature with a lot of people, is that when you watch other people, I know that people will say it's how you get better, it's how you pick up things. My problem is I start questioning who I am, and how I'm doing it when I watch other people do it. I do not like watching other people speak. I find it uncomfortable. I find that I start to judge myself. And so anyone who I would call a speaking hero is not because of their speaking. Blake is one of my speaking heroes because of the way he behaves when he's not speaking. And so, like, I've always talked about that. That's a reason I look up to you. I have individual speeches that have moved me tremendously, but I wouldn't say I have any speaking heroes. One, because, and I know that some people will feel that this is the wrong thing to do if you want to master your art. But I find that the more I watch other people do what I love, the more it drags me away from my authentic way of doing it, because I'm trying to emulate things that I think work for them, as opposed to simply focusing on what works for me and staying true to who I am. I have certain speeches, a lot of RFK speeches. He gave one to the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. He did one the night after, or the day after Martin Luther King was shot, called "The Mindless Menace of Violence." But I know he didn't write those speeches. Blake, I don't remember his name, but he runs a youth speakers bureau now. And for years he was speaking on the circuit, and now he's sort of brought together a bunch of other young speakers. And I saw him speak at an event, and I remember I ran up to him backstage and told him he made me want to be a better speaker. Do you remember his name, Blake? I think you might have worked with him.
Ship.
Yeah, Josh Ship. He blew me away with a 10-minute speech. I went up and told him that he made me hate myself as a speaker and made me want to be a better speaker. Because once, one of the best compliments I ever heard was my co-host at TEDx Toronto, the first year I hosted, a spoken word poet killed it. And as he came off the stage, my co-host grabbed him aside. He said, "I hate most spoken word poets because I love spoken word poetry." And he just said, "I love what you did so much." And I think that maybe sometimes the reason I stay away from watching other people speak is that I don't like most speakers because I love great speaking. And so I know that sounds weird, but I figure let's be honest and vulnerable here, as Bobby would. I don't have speaking heroes except for people who they're my heroes and they happen to be speakers.
And I think that's fair. I mean, we all have what motivates us, what fuels us. I can tell you that when I watch Drew speak and Blake speak, I want to be a better speaker. Like it motivated me.
Man.
Like watching Blake with the guitar and the drums and how he set that up, that was like fantastic storytelling. And then I think with Drew, like just his articulation, eloquence was just like, wow, like just even in regular conversation, it was just really, really good. And I wanted to be better. And so I think for me, that's when I see people like you guys, I want to be better. So and that's but I think each person is different in terms of what motivates them. So I appreciate that vulnerability. We got a lot of questions coming in now, which is great, but that's what we want. We want questions. So if you're liking this, please follow Drew and Blake across their channels, wherever they are. YouTube, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever it might be. It's Snapchat, I don't know, wherever they are, follow them, okay? Make sure you engage them, ask questions, that would be great. If you like this to me is a great live stream, so you can share it on your channels as well, because the live stream will always be there on my LinkedIn profile. Another question came up is, what are the best way to find talks since TED kind of hides them? Anybody want to take that on? I mean, I'll go to Drew. Sorry, go to Blake. How about you? Any thoughts on this?
Well, something that I say to folks that I work with, and even myself, is if I want to do one of these things ever, I just go to the TED.com website, and you can find a list of like TEDx events happening around the world. So if you just take 30, 45 minutes one day and kind of cruise through that list, that resource, you can click around, and some there's dead links and old websites, and others it's like people that are literally months away from putting on their show and they need speakers yesterday. So that's like a straightforward, practical, tactical approach. But then my whole thing is around, okay, yeah, it's one thing to know where opportunities are. It's a whole different sport how you show up to be chosen to participate. Because like even all the businesses out there where you can like have a speaking coach or people can get you booked, that's awesome. And everyone gets those same lists. It's like everyone just gets fed like lists of bureaus and conferences. So I think the magic is in how you just are as you engage in the journey of getting a no thanks or a, yeah, we've chosen you. So here's a little sidestep. It's related to TEDx, but any speaking opportunity for that matter. I think I said this to Drew one time. When people go to my website, in my youth speaking world, I have an agent in that side of the speaking business. So they go to my website, they fill in the form, it goes to the agent, and I get like a CC'd email of like, someone has inquired about Blake. So it's just like a survey thing. I don't have to do anything with that. The agent handles it. I might get booked, I might not. Anytime I get those and I catch them, I, in the moment, because otherwise I won't do it, I'll forget. In the moment, I get out my cell phone and I make a video to the person. So let's say Bobby's looking for speakers and wants to book me maybe. So I see, some guy named Bobby Umar just filled in a form. I'll get out my iPhone and I'll feel like this. Literally, okay, it would be here if this was the moment. I'm like, hey, Bobby, my name's Blake. I see that you went to my site, maybe checked it out a little, filled in a form, just wanted to actually put a face to the name. Hello, I'm a human. This is not AI. Just want to say thanks for making the time. You're probably shopping around for speakers right now. If I'm chosen for the opportunity, amazing. It's going to be epic. If I'm not, perfect. There's tons of amazing speakers out there. I'm just in the middle of organizing my basement studio, so I should probably get back to that. If you don't think the hat's professional, we're probably not meant to work together anyway. Love this hat. And just have a great day. My teammate Brandon will take it from here. Talk soon. I send that stuff, and every time I send videos like that, I basically get the booking because they're like, no one else sent us something like that. And it's so easy to be human when the world's going robotic.
That's good. Yeah. That's awesome.
That works. I did some R&D with Blake, rip off and duplicate. I also understand that you never steal ideas, you benchmark a best practice, but Blake hit it on the head there. Mark, in terms of your question, I'm not sure if you mean how do you find where the TED events are, or like how do you find individual talks? I think Blake hit it on the head for how do you find what TED events might be out there. If you're looking for specific talks, there's what I do is I just go to all the lists, right? Like top TED or you just Google top TED Talks on leadership, top TED Talks on, hell, I'm on the list of the 10 worst TED Talks ever given. There's a magazine that did that too. So I love doing it that way. And every single year, I think that I try to look around commencement address season in May and type in 2023, 2024's best commencement addresses. I love looking at commencement addresses because they're 20 minutes long. And I love the atmosphere, which is I want to help you people in this room be better and have a better life. And to me, that brings a perspective out there. So just in case that's what you were asking, my friend, that's how I find my favorite talks is every year around commencement time. I simply type in best commencement talks of this year, which will lead you to certain people where you can go find other speeches of theirs and so on and so forth. Honestly, I'll just type in a topic sometime on TED.com. See what pops up. And if you know what talk you're looking for, obviously you search for it. So that's why I was thinking you might be thinking about how to find good talks. That's how I always go about doing it. I basically crowdsource from other people.
And I'll just share two things. One is that, if you're really looking for these things, it takes some work. So if it's not available on the TED site, you're going to have to do a little bit of more searching and talking to people and finding out stuff and inquiring. And I'll give you a little story. I was working with a TEDx client recently, and she was like, she did a search on TED.com, found most of them were dead ends, nothing really happened. I said, okay, well, let's just do a little bit more here, do a little bit more, like, where, and she was only looking just where she lived. Like, okay, let's do like a 30-mile radius here. What's around here? Just start doing a little more digging. And next thing you know, she reached out to a bunch of places, and now she already has two opportunities, one to be in the team and the other one to actually potentially do a TED Talk next year. So the digging and the relationship building goes a long way. And that's the second thing I want to say is the secret trick, which is don't search for speaker applications or TEDx speakers. Search for seeking volunteers. So if you look for organizations that are trying to seek volunteers to join their team, then you can actually just find out by being part of their team. And maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year. Build a relationship, be part of the team, be a volunteer, help them out. And then longer term, you can get a TED Talk because you've built that relationship. So that's kind of my take on that. Now, I don't know how long you guys are going to stick around with us today, but I booked these guys because they're both busy guys, and we're all busy. So I do want to quickly talk about storytelling, because I think storytelling is something you two do very well. It's something I'm very passionate about as well, and I think I do well too. But actually, I'm going to start with a question, because there's a great question about this. I love this question. Given the cultural context where we are in today, what do you guys see as the most resonant stories that are connecting most of people today? What are we craving? I love that question. And so thank you, Michael, for that. Would anybody like to start with that one?
I'll grab this one.
Sure.
You know, the first question I ask whenever I'm been asked to put together a presentation is, I ask, what are they afraid of? Because there are three things, if you talk about them, people will listen. Things that make them angry, things that make them scared, and sex. So if you talk about those three things, people will listen. The third one, I don't really have a lot of reasons to ever bring that up. But things that make people angry, things that make people scared, they will pay attention if you tell them stories. Now, what you get to decide is whether you're going to be a politician or a speaker. Politicians add fear to try to win. And I think leaders try to remove fear so that people can succeed. And so you get to decide, once you identify what is this audience afraid of, you get to then decide, what can I do to make them less afraid? And I think that people are seeking stories that address their fears and how they can become less afraid. In the TED Talk that I did first, I knew people were afraid to call themselves leaders. And so I asked myself, what story can I tell that will make people less afraid of that? So I think it's always the best bet to sit back, look at your audience and say, what are they afraid of and how can I make them less scared? And that's where you start with your stories.
I love that part, because often when I talk about personal branding, I talk about your target audience, understanding their pain points and what scares them, what are their questions. So that's a great way to get going on that. Blake, what do you think?
Oh, I guess this is the finale. I got to make it sound good. What came to my mind when I read this awesome question was, first, Drew's going to have a killer answer, which he did. So that was my first thought. And the second thought I had was just the words, like, our own story. I feel like sometimes speakers, they'll just go source a bunch of stories out there. Like, I'll go find some stories and like that will make up my speech. That's cool. Whereas I think if we tell our own stories effectively and in a way that is relevant to the audience, not just us saying, so this one time, I find, for me anyway, that's the stuff that really resonates when I'm in an audience, when I'm hearing someone on that stage tell me their story, their experiences, their world. And truthfully, I sometimes find the simpler, the better. Like, people who went to Neptune twice in a day and came back, like, sweet story, but it's kind of tough to access and relate to. Whereas when people are just talking about an experience they had or the lens they have on day-to-day life and give me an insight that I just didn't have on that day-to-day life experience up until hearing them, I love stories like that. That's why I think what was so cool about Drew's TEDx talk when he kicked it off with the lollipop story, it's like, it's so universal and so beautiful and so accessible. It's not the, like, how to climb Everest 48 times and everyone's like moved but also stuck when they hear stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Sorry, brother. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, if it's your story, but it has to be about the audience. I think that's what Blake was just saying there, is that as you tell the story, you're trying to make the audience tell their version of the story to themselves. And so I've always said, even though it's your story, you shouldn't be the main character when you're on stage. The audience should be the main character, and every story you tell about yourself should be a lesson for the audience that they can actually use. So if you're going to talk about climbing Everest, you need to talk about, what are the 5 things I learned on Everest that I can use to get through my life in Toronto or Montreal or Sioux Falls or wherever, right? So it's you have to tell the story, but they have to be the main character. Sorry, Bobby, I interrupted you again.
No, it's fine. That's fine. I mean, I've been shifting the way I do my keynotes now, because I do add more stories to it. I used to be more structured with kind of the PowerPoint training piece and the 5 points here and the 3 points here, and I've changed that. And what I'll say, what are people craving? They're craving connection. They're craving to be understood and heard. They're craving to have relatability with one another. And they're craving to be understood that they're all struggling. Everyone is struggling in some way. And so for me, when I talk about, I tell personal stories about my life, but I definitely will tell stories about the struggle, the things that are real. I mean, gosh, there's got to be a TED Talk out there now about the Zoom mute button and how people struggle with that for a couple of years. But I'm very open about being very vulnerable about everything in my life. Feeling like a shit parent, feeling like shit body image stuff, feeling like my diabetes and binging is out of control, feeling like I can't please my parents, feeling like I don't know how I'm going to handle this cross-cultural marriage I have with my beige kids and all the intersections that we're dealing with. And I do that on purpose because I know that vulnerability storytelling is what really creates deeper connection understanding. And the person in the audience that's struggling will say, yeah, you know what? This person gets me because I struggle with that too. This person understands me and I can relate to them, and it's accessible as somebody that I can listen to. And so for me, those types of stories go a long way. And that's why I think they're so important. So I do appreciate you guys sticking around for this long. I'm not sure if you guys want longer. There are other questions, but if you guys have to go, you got to go. I do want to answer another question that's here, which
I need
is
to go, but I don't want to go because this is like so beautiful. I just want to stay in this road trip.
No, I appreciate that, Blake. But if you gotta go. Like I'm totally, if you have to go, then that's totally fine.
But yes, I do need to hop. Part of my story
Okay.
is feeding children tonight, so I'm gonna go do that.
Yeah, no worries,
Drew,
no worries.
Bobby, being with you both on this has been so cool. Time warp and like the present all at once.
You make my heart feel bigger, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. Good to see you, brother.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
And usually that's just my diet that does that.
All right. So thanks, Blake. See you later. Make sure you follow him. All right. Let me get to this question. Do you believe that AI and technology will have significant influence on the future of TEDx talks? If so, how do you foresee AI enhancing or changing the way speakers and the audience interact with these presentations? Wow, that's a doozy.
I'm going to give you the 3 best words in leadership I've discovered. I don't know. Because I'll tell you, if you don't say I don't know, one day you will demonstrate it. I honestly don't know. I know they're going to, because I'm sure there will be TED Talks AI generated, and that will be a TED Talk. Like, if there hasn't already, there will be a TED Talk on how this talk is entirely AI. How else? I don't know. I don't think we know anything about AI. I think the people who know the most about AI know they know the least about AI. So I'll be straight with you. I'm fascinated by how, but I hope this isn't a cop-out. I do not know. It is not something on which I have enough authority, I think. Bobby, you?
Yeah, I mean, I've had experience with AI, and I've certainly been leveraging it for my work and my brand out there and content. But what I'll say is that you're right. There's so much here. The people who are experts know 10%, and the rest of us know 0.1%. And that's why they're experts. And what I'll say is that, there's nothing, when it comes to AI, nothing compares to in-person, in-touch experiences. And so the truth is that even though there's an ATM, I still enjoy going to the bank teller, even though there's very few of them. I still enjoy that more than the ATM. And even if there is AI speeches and things like that, I'm still going to love being at a real event with real people on stage talking about real stuff in their own human experience, as opposed to the AI doing it. So for me, that's always going to be something that I think is still going to be, it's still going to stand out. Compared to the ones that are like that. And things will change, but I'm not sure how.
You know why AI can never really be as good as live is because to create the best stuff, the most amazing speech, the best story, the most incredible music, you have to be broken or get as close to being broken open as you can. And so I don't think that AI has the capability to be emotionally broken. And listen to Jagged Little Pill and then listen to everything else Alanis ever made and tell me that being broken doesn't change the art that you create. And because AI cannot be emotionally spent, can't be emotionally empty, can't be betrayed, can't be hurt, can't be jealous, I don't think it can ever create the same level of speaking and art that a real person can. Because I think you have to get as close to cracked open as possible to create what you really will. I know that if I'm going to create my best stuff, I have to come as close to being broken as I can take myself. And if I don't create new stuff, it's because I can't take myself there. And I don't think AI can do that.
Yeah, no, that's great insights. And again, thanks to Blake for being here, and Drew, thanks also for being here. This has been really great. For those of you who don't know, this is brought to you by the Thought Leadership Branding Club. And basically, I'm big on thought leadership now. And so I talk a lot about that on stage as well as on LinkedIn and everywhere else. And for me, thought leadership is about, building your speaking, your storytelling, building your relationship building your mindset and confidence, building your digital presence, and having a strong personal brand. And so we have a membership community where we have weekly calls. We have a call every Thursday, Friday. We bring in guest experts. Tomorrow we have Rob Gilbert from Toronto is going to talk about avoiding icky sales tactics. And then on Friday, Joshua Lee's going to talk about AI, which is going to be interesting. So if you want to learn more about what the Thought Leadership Brand Club does, let us know. Check out this is streaming from our main company page on LinkedIn. You can learn more about it. Drew, tell us what you're up to next, and where people can follow you or where you prefer to be followed.
DrewDudley.com has got all the links. I'm at Day One Drew on Instagram and I guess on Facebook. I don't have X/Twitter anymore. Sorry, Bobby. I'm one of those 40 or 25,000 people you lost, but not you didn't lose me. X or whatever the heck it's called, lost it.
I feel
What great symbolism for how the world is working. When you look at the history of Twitter, it's like little bird, X. So I think it really kind of captured how the world is working. DrewDudley.com is my place. And the rest of the fall, man, I'm just getting back in the swing of touring. So much time away from home, so many awesome opportunities. So like you and I are both, you can tell the hotel stuff behind us. We're doing our thing. Yeah. So yeah, my friend, my goal is to get back into shape, not just physical shape, but get back into the shape that you need to bring your best intellectual performance every time. And I'll tell you, if anyone else is struggling out there, look, we could say the pandemic's been over now for however many months. I'm still struggling to do the thing I was born to do. So if you're struggling with it, look, we're all doing it. We're all struggling to get back to our full speed, feel like we did before. So forgive yourself for what it's worth.
I really appreciate you saying that, Drew, because I mean, that I've also been on a weight journey my whole life, and I was doing quite well before the pandemic hit, and then everything just went down the shitter, which is what I call Twitter now, because of the X, right? So, but this is a side with it. But yeah, and I gained all the way back, and getting back into the speed of things has been really tough. I've been having a hard time finding momentum. So that's, again, everyone here is struggling with different things, and if you're willing to put it out there and to share your story and talk about it, everyone here can with community, with conversations, with connection, and with storytelling, you can actually connect with one another, share ideas, and also, I mean, I think everyone can get a TED Talk, because I think every person has a story to share and an idea that I think I'd love to hear. So that's why we do what we do.
The story is the basic unit of human understanding, right? Like, take a look through human history. That is the basic building block of everything that we've ever created. So, and tell your story. Like you just said it, my friend. You don't know when it's going to land on somebody. Like, I mean, after, I lost my girlfriend a few years ago, and I didn't cry for weeks afterwards. It was just such an overwhelming feeling. And then I'm driving along listening to The Moth. And look, if anybody here isn't familiar with The Moth, before we go, we got to tell you to listen to The Moth if you want to become a better storyteller. But there was a woman who was telling a story, and one of the lines in the story was, grief is just love coming face to face with its oldest enemy. And I had no idea that I needed to hear that. Wow. It broke the dam. I pulled over. I cried for half an hour because that person told a story 2 years earlier. She had told that story, and now it was on the podcast, and it helped some guy driving through Idaho. So whatever your story is, folks, put it out in the world, because you may not think it's important, but the biggest gift we can give other people isn't to make them say, oh, wow, I can't do that. I can't do this many TED Talks, or I can't give a speech, or I can't create that piece of art. We're taught to do that, but the greatest gift we can give other people is to make them look at us and say, I thought I was the only one. Like, man, it. Like, I thought it was. You're not the only one, man, who put the weight back on. You're not the only one who now you're supposed to go back, and because we did it again, right? My next tattoo, Bobby, is just going to say, you were younger the last time you tried that. Because I think I need to be reminded of that every time I want to go for that hike, every time I want to do that, go back to the gym, every time that I want to lose weight. You were younger the last time you did that. Have a little bit of compassion for yourself. Forget self-care. Don't forget self-care. But self-compassion will overcome most of the stuff that beats us down, man.
I love this. It's turning into a more vulnerable, deeper, on a deeper, darker live stream. This is good, and I appreciate it. Listen, thanks everybody for listening in to us. Feel free to follow us, ask questions. Drew, thanks so much for your time. And if you have any follow-up questions, guys, just tag us, and we can maybe see your questions afterwards. Thanks so much for being here and being part of this live stream. So long, everybody.